So Google recently published a white paper that dives into all the different ways that blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum are vulnerable to quantum computers. And let me briefly cover this. Bitcoin is vulnerable anytime that you expose a public key. Now, you actually don't necessarily expose your public key right away when using Bitcoin because addresses on Bitcoin are actually the hash of a public key. So if somebody gives you a transaction to a new public key, the public doesn't see the public key. They only see the hash of that public key. And you cannot invert the hash to a private key, even with a quantum computer. But if you have the public key, you can. At the time that you spend a transaction on Bitcoin, you expose the public key. You have to expose the public key so that people can validate the signature. So after you've already signed a transaction, somebody with a quantum computer would be able to crack your private key. Now, there's two ways this is a problem. The first way is if you ever reuse your public key, that means from the time that you expose it to the time that you reuse it, you are now exposing yourself to an attack by quantum computers. So anytime you reuse keys, you are vulnerable. The second way is at the time that you create the transaction, because of the way the permissionless mining of Bitcoin works. Basically, malicious actors can simply monitor new transactions, and they can actually find your transaction before it's been mined, crack the key, and then publish a conflicting transaction, and their conflicting transaction can be mined. So even if you hide your public keys on Bitcoin, at the time you create a transaction with a sufficiently fast quantum computer, they will be able to crack your keys at that time. It's still better to hide your public keys, but you are still exposed at the time that you create a transaction. Now, Ethereum is actually worse than Bitcoin because Ethereum, by design, exposes your public key and reuses it over and over and over again. Ethereum is not designed to hide your public key. It's designed to expose your public key. So with Ethereum, the difference is that it is hard to generate new keys all the time because the whole design of Ethereum is based on this idea that you have an account. In order to use your account, it has this long-lived public key that is exposed publicly. And now, like Bitcoin, you expose this the first time you create a transaction. But unlike Bitcoin, you intentionally reuse this same public key over and over and over and over and over again. So Ethereum and all EVM-compatible blockchains are more vulnerable to quantum computers than Bitcoin is. EarthBucks is actually the safest possible blockchain that uses classical cryptography. Because, first of all, like a good Bitcoin wallet, EarthBucks does not reuse keys. So every time you create a new address, you're actually creating a new key. Keys are never reused on EarthBucks. Also, like Bitcoin, EarthBucks hides the public key from the public behind a hash function. So there aren't any public keys to hack because the public doesn't see the public key until you create a transaction. But this is where EarthBucks is quite different from Bitcoin, because EarthBucks does not have, nor will it ever have, the sort of mempool or permissionless mining that Bitcoin has. EarthBucks has permissioned mining. Currently, I am the only person operating a mine on EarthBucks. When I open this up to other mines in the future, it's permissioned, which means you're not going to have random attacker nodes coming in trying to steal your EarthBucks. So the miners are much more trustworthy by design than the way it works on Bitcoin, where you have no idea who's operating a mine. So there's an increased level of trust, and the public doesn't see this until the transaction is already confirmed, because there's no mempool in the same way that there is with Bitcoin. When you create a transaction in EarthBucks, it propagates to all mines and is confirmed right away, because there is an algorithm where all mines see the new transaction and confirm it with each other before the block is even created. So there's essentially zero opportunity to actually crack a key and then use the cracked key on Bitcoin, because by the time some malicious actor sees your public key, the transaction has already been confirmed by the miners. So EarthBucks is naturally resistant to quantum computers already. Now, I wrote a blog post about this. I'm going to show you. Here's the article, paper from Google. I would strongly recommend reading this paper if you're involved in the industry, in the blockchain industry or cryptocurrency industry. You should definitely read this because this sketches out all the different ways blockchains are vulnerable. I wrote this blog post just this morning covering all the ways that EarthBucks is resistant to quantum computers. If you're interested, please read this blog post. EarthBucks is, if there's a spectrum of existing blockchains between quantum resistant and quantum vulnerable, Bitcoin is pretty vulnerable. Ethereum is extremely vulnerable. EarthBucks is way over on the resistant side. We are maximally resistant to quantum computers, given that we are using classical cryptography. The only way we could improve this further is by using post-quantum cryptography, which I almost certainly will do, but I'm not going to do right away. Why? Because although it would hypothetically, basically the final gain we could get by switching to post-quantum cryptography is even these permissioned mines wouldn't be able to do anything malicious if we switch to post-quantum cryptography. But I'm not going to rush out there and do that because unfortunately the existing standardized post-quantum algorithms are worse than elliptic curve cryptography. But basically, the key size is significantly larger with the new algorithms. We need to give researchers time to invent better algorithms. So long as quantum computers don't even actually exist, we have no urgent need to upgrade. EarthBucks was also designed to be upgradable. So like when we need to switch the cryptography, we can. It's upgradable. That's a whole other story, but EarthBucks is very upgradable. We'll just switch it when we need to. Right now, we don't need to switch anything. It's better to not switch anything because it would actually just make it worse to use these dramatically larger key sizes that we have to use for post-quantum crypto. So we're going to hold off on switching any of the crypto to post-quantum crypto until either the risk is actually higher or we have better algorithms. If we have better post-quantum algorithms, I would love to use that, but they need to be more competitive with the classical cryptography. So the reality is right now, EarthBucks is in a very, very good place where we simply aren't vulnerable to quantum computers if they even existed, and they don't even actually exist. So what I'm going to do next is, so for EarthBucks 2.0, we're going to move forward with that. I'm going to be pursuing basically the existing plan for EarthBucks 2.0, which is spawning new mines and improving the speed of processing transactions. That was already the plan for EarthBucks 2.0. I am probably not going to be adding in any sort of post-quantum cryptography for EarthBucks 2.0. The only thing I could say we're going to do is basically continue to be alert and aware about the status of quantum computers. And if something changes, then we may need to change in response. Right now, there's nothing we have to do. We're already maximally resistant to quantum computers, and it would be a downgrade to switch to post-quantum cryptography, not an upgrade. So we're not going to switch right now. We'll just stay aware, and if something changes, then we'll just be aware of that and factor that in when that occurs. Okay, well, that's enough for today. Thank you very, very much for listening.